A Refusal to Mourn the Death by Fire of a Child in London by Dylan Thomas. The poet Dylan Thomas is against the sentiment of mourning the death. He cannot show grief at the death of the particular child like the others do. If God created all birds, beasts, and flowers, He simultaneously created darkness. However, it is not the end of the world unless the last dawn breaks in silence and the silent hour tumbles back into the sea. The poet does not see it as the end of the world. First, he says his last day has not come. When the last day comes, it will take him back to heaven, along with the symbol of water bead and the year of the corn. In fact, the poet does not want to break away with death as the grave truth. It is no use shedding tears over the individual death. He does not again want to insult the institution of death through his fears. The dead child is in her coffin with the formerly dead. Its dead mother is resting beside. When the rising Thames is not weeping in its hallowed water, little sense carries in mourning. Okay, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Bachelor and Master English. Today we are talking about a poem by Dylan Thomas. The title of the poem is Refusal to Mourn the Death by Fire of a Child in London. In our today's discussion, we are talking about the summary of the poem. There will be critical analysis and finally reader's opinion. I'll be also giving summary or discussion in Nepali as well. Before I begin my discussion with this text, I should like to request you all, if you are new to my channel or if you have not to subscribe my channel yet, please subscribe my channel, and if you think this video is worth watching, please like, comment and share it. I'll be trying my level best to give the lessons worthy of your knowledge. And let's talk about the poem. Here is a summary of the poem. A Refusal to Mourn the Death by Fire of a Child in London is a poem by English poet Dylan Thomas. The poem begins with the speaker describing the only point at which he will allow himself to mourn the death of a child. This child died in a fire in London, and while it was a sorrowful event, the speaker will not truly feel for her until it is time for him to face his own death. He knows that he will return to the place from which he came, whenever that may be, as well as those who died during the time and space. Above all, the poem tells of a speaker's inability to comprehend the great losses suffered by London during the Second World War. Okay, let's discuss the poem in Nepali. लन्डनमा आगोले जलेर मरेको बच्चीको मृत्युमा बिलौन नगर्ने शीर्षक यो कविताको लामो शीर्षक छ। यो अङ्ग्रेज कवि डिलन टोमसको एक व्यवस्था अथवा उदासीनता विषयमा केन्द्रित एक फुटकर कविता हो। यो एउटा बालक वा मानवको मृत्युमा बिलौन गरेर नौटङ्की देखाउने र अनर्गल प्रचार प्रसार गर्ने पक्षमा कवि नभएको र यत्रो संसारमा सारा चिजहरू भगवानले बनायो, सबै बनाउँदा बनाउँदै उसले चाहिँ अन्धकार पनि बनायो। जीवनको सिर्जना भयो भने मृत्युको पनि चाहिँ व्यवस्था भयो। त्यसपछि जो जन्मन्छ त्यो पक्कै पनि मर्छ। अब आफू पनि एकपटक मर्नै पर्छ। त्यो मर्ने भएपछि अब यहाँ एकजनाको मृत्युमा आँसु बहाएर नौटङ्की गरेर संसारलाई चाहिँ तमासा देखाएर के गर्नु छ र आखिर। त्यसो भएर कविले यत्रो लन्डनमा बग्ने टेम्स नदीले त केही वास्तापास्ता गरेको छैन भने म एउटाले चाहिँ केही आँसुका थोपा चुहाएर हुनेवाला केही पनि छैन। त्यसो भएर यो बिलौनाको नौटङ्की गर्नु सट्टा यो जीवनको वास्तविकता बुझ्नुपर्छ भन्ने कविको आशय छ। ले यस कवितामा भन्न चाहन्छन् किन विशेष परिस्थितिमा उनी आफ्नो एउटा चासो नदेखाइकन चुप्प लाएर बस्न चाहन्छन्। ईश्वरले पशु पन्छी र फलफुलहरूको सिर्जना गरे, त्यस्तै तुच्छ अन्धकारको पनि। जबसम्म मानिसले मौन घोषणा गर्न सक्दैनन् के भने अन्तिम बिहानी र कोलाहलयुक्त समय समुद्रबाट टुप्लुक्क देखा परिसक्यो र मैले पनि मेरो पालोमा स्वर्गका साम्राज्यमा पानीका थोपा र अन्नको बाला दिएर जानै पर्ने भयो। अनि मात्र म आवाजको छायालाई प्रार्थना गर्ने अनुमति दिनेछु वा मेरा नुनिला आँसुलाई भव्यता साथ बच्चीको मृत्युमा शोक संवेदना प्रकट गर्ने मौका दिनेछु। त्यस बखत वा मृत्युको गहिरो सत्यतालाई आघात पुर्याउने छैन र सासको ढुटुकीलाई निर्दोषिता र यौवनका शोक गाउँदै अपमानित गर्ने छैन। यो मृत बच्ची आफू अघिका मृतसँग लामो कात्रोमा अरू जस्तै बेरिएर सुतेकी छे। यो त सनातन सत्यसँगै गाँसिएको छ। आमाका काला भइसकेका नसासँग मिसिएकी छौ। उर्लँदो टेम्स नदीको शोकहीन जलले पवित्र भएकी छ। यो मात्र मरेर अरू नमरेका भए पो मैले रुन सुहाउँथे। आखिर यो जस्ता कति मरे। अब एकपटक जन्मेका सबै मरेका छन् भने मैले एउटै केटीको मृत्युमा एक दुई थोपा आँसु चुहाएर नुनिला आँसु चुहाएर हुनेवाला केही पनि छैन। Okay, that's very interesting part of the poems and why he showed his indifference to mourn the death by fire of a child in London. A refusal to mourn the death by fire of a child in London by Dylan Thomas tells of a speaker's inability to comprehend the great losses suffered by London during World War II. Throughout the poem of 24 lines, each containing 6 lines, the speaker and perhaps poet Thomas himself is attempting to come to terms with death and what comes after. Upon seeing the horrors of World War II, it is likely that Thomas was unable to comprehend the full magnitude of what had been lost and was seeking out an answer of some kind through his writings. At first glance, the reader may think that the speaker is primarily concerned with a child's death, but a closer reading reveals that the speaker is extremely self-centered. The speaker immediately focuses on himself in the poem, rather than describing the child or group of people he is mourning. He is more concerned with his own response to death rather than the sadness that accompanies death. We see the speaker questioning his beliefs and his actions. This is not an uncommon response when dealing with the loss. People experience a full range of emotions when dealing with death. Questioning one's belief does not seem out of ordinary. A refusal to mourn the death by fire of a child in London is a poem of 24 lines divided into 4 stanzas of 6 lines each. That follows the rhyme scheme ABC, ABC. The title indicates the poet's rejection of conventional means of responding to death. The refusal takes on greater force as it confronts to war. The fire refers to the fire bombing or mid-century bonfire of London during the World War II. The ambiguity of the poem's last line, after the first death there is no other. Suspense contraries in a vision of wholeness. Nature is compelled towards regeneration. Therefore, when the death is final, life itself is eternal. The poem is written in the first person and more is revealed about the poet who speaks than about the child who has died. The poet declares that not until he himself dies will he declaim the child's death. He rejects somber elegies with their toxic spirituality in dying. The child has united with the elements from which life springs and therefore is no longer prey to death. The poem confounds contradictory images of life and death, sacred and profane, human and non-human, and the one and the many in an attempt to capture the inexhaustible fecundity and resilience of life. It climaxes in a sentiment which is itself a paradox. Death is final and yet is ultimately definitive. Here is reader's opinion. The end of creation, words can add nothing to the natural purity and youthfulness which the child has carried with her in her flaming death. The poem is the speaker's account of his desire to mourn, even though he says that he is not going to. The entire poem contradicts itself. The speaker cannot make sense of death, so instead of trying to mourn, he refuses to, which becomes a subconscious act of mourning. Throughout the poem, we see the speaker questioning his beliefs and his action. That is not uncommon response when dealing with loss. Thomas does not want to be depressed by the routine darkness of life. Life and death are the two sides of a coin in his opinion. If he sees a child dead, it is not the first one nor the last for the world. Death is a grave truth. The river Thames does not mourn anybody. Death. In this manner, he expresses his indifference to mourn the death of somebody.